Hello crafty friends, this is a full process video of how I decorated the pages of my latest junk journal. The pages were decorated over multiple days. It wasn't just done all in one shot. I have roughly 6 hours of footage. I just let the camera run while I was decorating the pages, and I've just consolidated that into a just over an hour video. And I have put that at a 3 times speed, as nobody wants to watch a real-time video for 6 hours. I will talk through everything that I'm doing on the pages. I will include my thought process. You will also notice that I go back and forth in the book. I don't just start on the first page and decorate in an orderly fashion. I will skip pages. I will come back to certain pages and add or remove elements. I do go back and forth a lot, but that's just my process. If you'd like to see how I created this journal, I do have videos on that, and I will link those in the description box below. Part 1 is actually creating the journal from scratch, and part 2 is how I decorated the cover. On this page, I've created a simple pocket. I've just used a piece of printed vintage style paper. I've just torn that with a ruler to size. You'll notice I don't measure much with a ruler, and I don't cut anything with a cutter or a scissors. I like to tear mine. I do like that rough, more worn look. I created this journal with a printable kit called Vintage Rose Medley. These tags are part of the kit, and because I print my kits on a regular copy paper, the paper is obviously not very stiff. So to make the tags a bit more sturdy, I always like to glue them onto a cardstock. I'm using a double-sided scrapbook paper. I find a paper that is complementing the theme of my journal, and then I just stick that down with a glue stick. You could also use double-sided tape, and then I trim them to size. And then you will see that on the back side it has a coordinating color. This one is just a beige with a very subtle vintage text print. And then I use a little bit of distress ink to distress the edges. I have some vintage bus tickets that I've just cut, and I'm going to attach this to the front of the pocket with a large paper clip. I'm sure I'll come back to that pocket. When I decorate my journals, I like to not just stick down elements. I like to add a little bit of what you'd maybe call an art journaling or a mixed media kind of feel. So I do some stenciling and also some texture paste, which you'll see. And what I like to do is I normally pick 1 or 2 stencil designs to use throughout the book. Using too many, I think, makes it a bit too wishy-washy, but if that's what you want to do, that's obviously perfectly okay. I like to pick 2 and use those alternating through the journal. The first stencil I'm using has these leaves, which I really like. It's one of my favorite stencils, and I've just used that with a blending brush and some green distress ink, and then I've splattered some white acrylic paint. It's watered down acrylic paint. Just splattered that gently. It just lifts and lightens the page. And I want to embellish it a little bit. What I also like to do in my journals, I like to use the same papers throughout on different pages. This helps to make everything cohesive. So you'll notice that I have used the light pink and that goldy maroon color in other aspects of the journal as I go along. I've also put a piece of cheesecloth underneath this sentiment and a piece of pink bunched up thread. And then I stick all that down with a clear craft glue. I don't always fill the entire page. I like to keep my embellishments to a certain area. This allows then for plenty of journaling space on the rest of the pages. This is a great way to use up scraps and also little bits that you have that are lying around that's only one of and you're not quite sure what to do with. If you're using a printable kit, of course you don't have to, but if you are, a lot of times the kits will include little things that you can cut out that you can use, little fussy cut items. This one's got a little label that I think will suit this page, so I've just fussy cut that and stuck that down. You'll notice my journal is made up of a combination of the printable kit and coffee stained paper and some other papers. You can make it whichever way you want. I love my journals to have the pages overflowing and spilling out. So I like tabs, I like strings, I like lots of things coming out of the journal once it's closed. So I'm adding a tab there. It's just a simple tab. It's a ephemera ticket. It's actually from Taperlogy. A lot of the items I'm using that I'm stuffing into the pockets are from Taperlogy. I'll put a link in the description box below. And I had just cut that in half and then added it to the edge of the page with some glue. One of my go-to page decorations are snippet strips. I'm going to put at least 4 or 5 in this journal. It has 3 signatures, but depending on the size of the journal, I'll put quite a few. I will start with a strip of paper, which is the size of the page, depending where you want to put the snippet strip. And then I tear little pieces of paper that are matching my journal. This is a great way to make everything cohesive and link colors and elements together. So I will tear little pieces of bits of paper. I will distress some of them. I've got some vellum. I'll use fabric, lace, ribbon, anything you have, and things that you're using throughout the journal. Put them into your snippet strips. Now I'm just doing a quick glue down with a glue stick just to keep these in place, because I am going to run my snippet strip under the sewing machine. You don't have to sew it if you don't have a sewing machine. You can just glue it down. Just use a more sturdy glue than a glue stick. But because I'm addicted to sewing paper and I love all the threads, I am going to run it under the sewing machine. And then to attach it to the page, I'm going to use a hot glue gun. You don't have to use a hot glue gun. You can use a craft glue, but I want it to dry instantly or really, really quickly so I can turn the page and carry on. I don't have a lot of patience for glue drying. You could also use double-sided tape. This page corner is torn, so I'm going to work with that. I'm going to tear it a little bit more and distress the edge. How I like to tear it and make it look very worn is I tear downwards and then curl the little edges out and use some distress ink on that. I'm going to add some more stenciling on this page. I'm just adding a hardcover book under the page just to give me a good surface to work on. The other stencil I've chosen to use is this number stencil, another of my favorites. So I will use those 2 stencils throughout my journal. Now using texture paste and a small palette knife, I'm going to put a small amount of numbers in the top right hand corner. As you can see, some of it has smudged or bled through. I personally like that because it makes it look more worn and vintage. But of course, it's personal preference. Once that's nice and dry, I'm going to turn the pages over and add the same at another section of the journal. Like I said earlier, I like to repeat elements throughout the book. I'm now going to add some color to the texture paste. If you only have inks that are in a pad and you really want to use that color, you definitely can. So what you'll do is you'll use an acrylic block or some kind of waterproof sheet. You'll press the ink pad onto that to get some ink on that and then spray with water, and then the ink becomes a liquid format so you can use the paintbrush with it. So I'll dip my paintbrush into the ink and then I'll scrape it on the edge of the page just to get some color concentrated there, and then I use a spray bottle with water and spray that and allow the ink to flow by itself in between the texture paste. And of course, if you have liquid ink, you can use that too. You could also use watercolor or watered down acrylic paint. The idea is not to cover the entire area with color. It is just to get it over where the texture paste is. It's just a page accent. And yes, the page will buckle because it is a wet medium. I personally don't mind that because I want the pages and the book to look old and worn and used. But if you prefer it to be flatter, you can always just open the book and run an iron over it. Be careful though, you don't melt the texture paste. I'm going to do the same for the other section where I applied the texture paste. Now, in my videos, I don't like to talk just for the sake of talking, and I don't like to fill space with my talking with random stuff. I only really like to talk about the project. So if I am repeating a process, for example this, I'm not going to talk through it because I've already explained it previously. I also don't play music. With copyright laws these days, it's very difficult to find copyright-free content to use, and then you have copyright strikes on your video, and it's just all too hard. So I'm just going to leave it quiet. You're welcome to play your own music or podcast in the background, and then I will start talking again when I create the next element, when I'm explaining something new. I would like to add though that if you have any questions about any part of this process in this video, please do ask me in the comment sections below. I will do my very best to answer it in a timely manner. If anything, I can create a more detailed video on that part to explain it better. Tabs are not only for the side of the pages, you can put it on the top or the bottom. I'm adding one at the top here. I like it to stick out from the top of the book when it's closed. If you're interested in the digital kit that I have used, the Vintage Rose Medley, which is available from NectarsCreations on Etsy, she has been kind enough to give us a lovely discount for you to use if you purchase anything from her shop. Her link will be in the description box below. If you use that, the discount code will automatically apply to your cart. You'll notice I pause sometimes as I'm paging through. This is sort of me thinking. There was actually a lot more of that happening, which I had to cut out because I didn't want to have just this video of just nothingness while I'm thinking about what's happening next or what I'm going to be doing. So although it seems that not much thought is going into this, I am spending a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to be doing. This dark pinky paper is from the kit. I've just torn a small rectangle which will serve as a pocket. Again, I've roughed up the edges and corners, and I'm going to add a small vellum pocket at the bottom. This is printed vellum from Taperlogy. And I have stitched that together with my sewing machine. A tip when sewing vellum onto something, especially for a pocket, always have the piece of vellum larger than what you need. It is much easier to sew with a sewing machine than having it exactly the right size and try to keep it aligned. That is quite difficult and will very rarely align correctly. Or maybe it's just me, I don't have patience for that. So make it bigger and then just cut it down to size after you've stitched it. I'm attaching the pocket with double-sided tape. This is very thin double-sided tape so we don't lose too much pocket space, so we can fill it with lots of tags and goodies. Another tag from the kit. This one I'm going to add a tie at the top using a piece of fabric, the same fabric that I used for my journal closure. And I'm going to attach that again with a sewing machine, leaving all those beautiful threads. And as I do, I'm going to swap that out with one I put in earlier. There will be more swapping and changing in the making of this journal. I'm going to add a tie to this one too, but first I'm going to put an eyelet. I was just checking on the cover because I have a tag with an eyelet on the cover too, and I wanted to use the same style eyelet. So I've added that on, and then I'm using a piece of Hessian string to tie a double bow at the top. Another thing I like to use in my journals are die cuts for embellishments. And again, I choose one or two designs that I will use throughout. So those leaves that you see, they are from a die cut, and I've cut some green ones with my Big Shot, and I'm going to be using that as a decoration underneath the paper ruffle. I'm also adding a piece of plain coffee stained paper as part of the pocket filler. For this pocket, I'm just roughing up the edges. I want it to look like somebody opened this up and used it or read it multiple times over the years. I use cheesecloth quite a lot. I think it enhances, especially embellishment stacks. It's thin enough that it doesn't make it too bulky, and it's very subtle, so it creates a subtle texture underneath elements. So I do tend to use that quite a bit. I've put some underneath the paper ruffle, stuck it all down with craft glue, and adding the label on the top left. This label was part of the kit. Now, I do like me a little bit of gold leaf, and I have that as an accent throughout this journal. So I'm going to make a little embellishment for this pocket. I have a piece of cardstock. I've applied some glue stick, and I'm applying my gold leaf on top. I want a solid area of gold leaf. And then I have these beautiful numbered die cuts. I'm going to create a gold number 5 as a decoration for this page. I've run it through my die cut machine, and I'm just going to pull it out very gently because the gold leaf is quite fragile. and then you have a beautiful metallic gold focal point. I'm going to attach that with glue. I'm really loving this. I hope you love it too. It's one of my favorite corner embellishments. And don't throw away the negative piece from your cutout. We will use that as an embellishment separately in another part of the journal. For more of a vintage feel, I'm going to add some vintage tape. I have a video on how to create this. I will link it in the description box below. And I will add it multiple times throughout the book. Paging back to this pocket, it obviously needs something more. I'm going to add this botanical rub-on. It is from Taperlogy. If you don't have these things, that is fine. You don't have to go out and buy them. You can use cutouts from a magazine. You can use stickers. You can hand draw something. Do try and use what you have. Adding another ready-made tag. I'm rounding the corners and adding a little bit of distress on the edges. As much as I like to add lots of elements on a page, I also like some pages simpler with just one element. I think it creates good balance. I'm sticking down this vintage text with some glue stick just to hold it in place, and then I'm going to add some more of that vintage tape. Feel it needs something more here. I'm going to add a little bit of gold leaf directly onto the page, and then one of my leaf die cuts. Very simple, just to give that page a little bit of enhancement. And I'm going to finish that section off with a small piece of the vintage tape as if it's holding the botanical in place. I'm loving this corner. Let me show you again. This pink leaf is from a Christmas decoration that I've kept because I really want to use it somewhere. It'll go in this journal. Just have to find the right spot for it. Not everything in the journal has to be attached to a page or in a pocket. You can just leave things loosely in between the pages, like this postcard that I have. It's not a vintage postcard, it's a vintage look-like, and I'm just going to distress the edge on the back so it's not quite so white, and just slip it between two of the pages. Some more tags and journaling cards from the kit. Again, I'm attaching these to a cardstock. I do this with all the elements, well, the majority of elements. The ones will be tags or journaling cards, not with the embellishments or fussy cuts as much. And for this one, I'm going to add a piece of music note printed ribbon at the top, and I've rounded the corners and distressed the edges. And I feel this one is a little bit too long, so I'm just going to chop it a little bit smaller and then round the corners again. Save the cut off piece, we can put that in a snippet strip later. The contents of this pocket will change somewhat until I get a good balance. I did warn you that I go back and forth a lot. I'm also going to add this label to the pocket, not all the way across. A third of it is going to wrap around to the page behind, and I'm going to write on it. I'm just going to write Vintage Rose Medley, which is the name of the kit I've used. You can of course stamp it or write anything you want. This specific kit includes this beautiful envelope, which I'm going to fussy cut, fold, and then glue together. And then I'm going to add like a sort of letter inside. I have this piece of vintage text print. I'm just going to fold it into 4 to stress the edges and pop that in the envelope like a secret letter. And then to add it to the journal, I'm going to put it over the page edge and attach a very large paper clip. I'm going to move it to a plainer coffee stained page so that the envelope is visible from both sides. It was getting a little bit lost with the other background paper. And that negative from the number 5 that we kept, we're now going to attach it to the top right hand corner of this page. Roughing up the edges a little bit and adding some distress ink. When you're going for a vintage style, you want everything to look used and worn over the years. Another option is to cut out all your tags and journaling cards and ephemera from your kit before you start decorating, and then putting them onto the cardstock backing board and punching the holes, putting in the ribbons. You can prepare everything beforehand. For me, I like to do it as I go. This is definitely personal preference. Adding some machine stitching to this one just to give it a bit more texture. And here creeps in my Christmas decoration leaf again. It looks so much better in real life, I must say. The video doesn't do it justice. And I love that it has a few sequins on the tip because I do like a little bit of bling. I don't want to stick it directly onto a page as I feel it'll just be very disjointed. So I want to find some kind of a background paper to attach it to first. I have this vintage text, which I think will ground it well. It's quite subtle, so the leaf will still be a focal point and stand out, but it won't just be a leaf stuck onto a coffee stained paper. I like to add dimension. I don't really have a method as to what adhesive I'm using when. You'll see me use double-sided tape, craft glue, Mod Podge, hot glue gun. I use all variety of them during my project. I don't specifically use one for anything specific. and I sort of just choose what's at hand at that time. I do tend though to use double-sided tape for paper on paper. I use a hot glue gun for chunkier elements when they're going onto a bulky textured underside just to help it hold. And then I like to use a liquid craft glue if I'm sticking something down over, like for example, cheesecloth, because then I don't have to stick the cheesecloth down separately. If I just put the cheesecloth down, apply wet glue on the embellishment and paste it down, it all just holds together. It's all a personal preference. Use whatever you have and whatever you feel happy with. Creating another snippet strip here, the same process as before, and adding elements that suit the theme and ones that I have already used in the journal, so everything links up and matches. I feel that the snippet strips need something a little bit extra. I'm going to add a few of the leaves from the die cut, just tucked in underneath in certain areas to give it some more depth and dimension. Some more stenciling with my number stamp. This time I'm using a blue color ink. And the reason I'm using blue, if you noticed, or maybe you haven't, in some pages of the kit, there are some blue pages. There are some blue elements. So I want to incorporate that in my embellishments. Not a lot or over the top, just a touch of blue so it links everything together. Always think about ways you can incorporate the different colors you're using in each embellishment that you're creating. For example, here I'm using the darker pink, which I've used in a pocket earlier in the journal. I'm using it as a small accent just underneath my little butterfly paper. You obviously don't have to use every single color or every single texture on every page. Just look back. That's why you see me sort of flipping back and forth. See what you have used, what colors you could pick up, and that you can emphasize on certain pages. And then that same pink you would have seen in the snippet strips, and later on in the journal I could also create a tag. I hope it makes sense how I'm explaining to use the same color or the same texture for multiple elements throughout the journal. Another touch of blue to pick up that blue accent, I'm going to add the stamp. And I will add a couple of stamps somewhere else in the journal so it's not just on its own by itself, just one stamp. A little rub-on leaf to add a touch of green. And some white splatter. I love this part. I feel that splatter makes everything link together. As I was working through and thinking I need some more blue elements, I wanted to add them back on some of the other pages. So I have this die cut, which I think is quite subtle. It's not very solid, so it's a very small touch of blue. So I've die cut some blue cardstock, and I'm going to add some of these elements again underneath some of the snippet strips to bring that blue color through to other pages. I think your view changes on pages or artwork if you leave it for a while and go back. That is why I go back and forth. Sometimes if something isn't working, I won't force it to work. I will leave it, I will work on something else and go back to it a day or two later with fresh eyes and fresh ideas. I want to decorate the inside of the covers too. Nothing too crazy, just something subtle, but I don't want them quite so plain. So for the inside front cover, I'm adding these vintage tickets, sticking them down with glue, and then adding a little bit of the vintage tape and a little bit of stenciling. I will do the same on the back inside cover, just different area I will be stenciling and a different kind of ephemera that I'll be taping down. As I was paging through the book again in the beginning, I realized I want something a little bit more on this page. So I thought maybe I'll number some pages, just a few. And this is page number 2. So I'm going to just put a stenciled number 2 with my blending brush and blue ink. This page needs a number 2, so I'm going to count back and just see what number page that is. I'm going to try and keep it accurate. Let's see how we go. Another accent I'm going to add is a piece of washi tape. This is a vintage style, like a newsprint type of style. I'm going to add just a piece here and there. It's simple but effective. On some of the plainer coffee stained papers, I don't always add elements that I'm going to stick down. I'm happy just to tuck something over the edge of the page and add it with a paper clip, a journal type of card that you can lift off, journal on, and then put back on. I feel this page needs something more too. I'm going to add a floral rub-on the top left-hand corner. Sometimes I add just simple things like just a splatter. I'm going to use this beautiful sage green acrylic paint. I'm going to water it down a little bit and just create a light splatter over both these pages. The green cardstock that I'm using with my tags is double-sided, and the other side has got these beautiful postcards, and some of them really match the theme of my journal. I'm going to cut some of them out and use them. There is that touch of blue that I was talking about that's in this kit. It's very subtle, but it's nice to continue that color through in a few little elements throughout the journal. Creating another embellishment cluster for this pocket, I'm using some offcuts and then a little label from the kit, a piece of fabric, and this is Hessian string that I'm wrapping around my finger 3 times to create these loops, and then I'm going to stick that down, let them stick slightly off the page, and I'm going to attach those with hot glue underneath all the other elements. I feel this pocket needs something more. I'm going to add an altered playing card that I created in a vintage style a while back. I just want to soften the back a little bit. I want the blue showing through to incorporate with the blue color, but I want to add some dress pattern tissue paper on the back just to soften and make it look more vintage. I've added the tissue paper with Mod Podge, and I'm going to add a layer of Mod Podge over the tissue paper too. This is to protect it and make it more sturdy. Otherwise, I think it could tear easily. I like using all bits that are on my desk. This is just a little scrap paper that is the end part from a spiral notebook that I had coffee stained. I'm going to use this piece as a tab. I love it. The fuller, the better. On some of my snippet strips, I'm also going to add some of the gold leaf. Again, I'm going to apply some glue stick onto a piece of cardstock, cover the entire area with the gold leaf, and then it'll be another element in between all the other papers. Don't be afraid to add color and paint to your pages. I'm using that beautiful sage green with a little bit of water and a flat paintbrush and just dabbing it over most of the page. Once it's dry, I'm going to add a little bit of gesso just to lighten some of the edges and soften the entire background. Using black permanent ink and the script stamp, I'm going to stamp a little bit over the whiter areas. I was thinking to create some strips of color as a base for a focal point. I go back and forth on these a little bit, trying to get the right color combination. It's not working great for me, so I'm bringing in the green leaf die cuts. Going to try something totally different because those color strips are not making my heart sing. Taking a piece of calico fabric and a blue butterfly rub-on, looking to see if that'll work better. These rub-on stickers are not only for fabric and paper. I found 10 ways to use them. I will link my video to that in the description box below. These rub-ons are available from Taperlogy. So removing the color strips totally, I'm going to add the butterfly on the fabric, and I need just some sort of a background paper for it to ground it. I'm going to use this book page. I've also die cut a beige colored cardstock in the leaves just for some lighter contrast, and I'm putting that in the background behind the green leaves. We need another pocket, and I'm going to make a corner pocket. Again, not measuring anything, it's all just really eyeballing with me. I'm going to use a ruler to tear it roughly to size. I'm using a scrapbook cardstock that has a vintage print. I like adding decorations or embellishments to all my pockets. I find then that the volume of your decoration is concentrated in certain pages, and then it balances out the very blank pages that we can leave. I've cut out a beautiful rose die cut from the kit, and I'm putting that on top of some cheesecloth. I'm going to add some gold leaf to allow that floral die cut to pop. I feel it is drowning a little bit behind the pocket print, but I'm also going to add a little bit of gesso now just to lighten the top area so that the focal point can actually stand out. And then just fill up with goodies. So we don't have one solitary corner pocket all on its own. I'm going to create a second one using the same cardstock. It's just going to be facing the other way and in the last signature of the book. Can you see all the bits hanging out and spilling over on the left-hand side of the book where I have the pages together? I'm loving that, and I think it's the chunkier the better. This really makes my heart sing. I'm using a wet glue here as opposed to a hot glue gun, so I'm able to move these if I need to. I'm not quite sure yet if I need to move them up or down, so having a few minutes to be able to relocate them or adjust them is always good. Redoing the gold number die cut that I did earlier, the number 5, I'll do number 3, as I really love that as a focal point and I want to add it here too. Again, talking about what I said to repeat certain elements throughout the book. So if we repeat that, just do it twice, it creates a cohesion between the pages and the overall theme. Going to create some more snippet strips. I'm going to do 3 at a time now. I think I'll just need 3 more, so I'm going to make them all together. This is a little color swatch that comes on the printable. For the specific printable, I'm going to use that too. I'm also going to use a piece of green fabric as a tab. I will put this at the bottom of the page. Pockets don't always have to be at the bottom of the page or in the corner. You can also have them long ways. I'm going to create a simple pocket on this smaller page on the left, just using a strip of rectangular paper. And it's going to be lying sideways. And then I'm going to tuck just one tag into that pocket. Not everyone has to be jam-packed, although I'm normally tempted to do that. For this page, I tried some stenciling which didn't work out great, so I scraped it off, and I'm going to cover that up with just a piece of dress pattern tissue paper. This also creates a nice point of difference, so there's a bit of texture on the paper and a different tone of the vintage color. Try not to be afraid of making mistakes or things not turning out great. For example, I tried the texture paste with a stencil, it didn't work out. That's okay, I scraped it off and I'm going to cover it up and do something else. There's always a way, I think, to fix it in most cases, so just try what you think will look great, and if it doesn't work out, it really doesn't matter. Just do something over it, cover it up, or change the plan. I will possibly create a part 2 to this video as this journal isn't complete at this point. It is about 3/4 done and there's a lot of elements I still want to add that I would love to show you. So I will work on a part 2, but I hope you enjoy part 1 in the meantime. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'm not sure if you made it all the way to the end. It is a pretty lengthy video, but even if you've just watched bits of it, I hope you were inspired to create some of those elements in your own journals. I would love if you subscribed to my channel and then also hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content and so that you can see what I'm going to be doing with this journal in a few weeks. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Happy creating, and I will see you again soon. Bye.